So have you seen What You Look Like as a Woman yet on Snapchat?
No, but there was a Hacker News blog post breaking it down. It was
The Asian guy?
yeah,
Yeah, it's so cool,
super
isn't it?
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. I've seen what I look like as a woman.
yeah.
Pretty cute. You know, some guys are actually taking their pictures of themselves as women and putting it on Tinder and seeing how many girls ask them out.
That is, by the way, that's like the most guy thing ever.
I
Like,
know.
dude, I got more Tinder matches than you did.
I saw one of them tweet and they're like, gosh, how do girls deal with so much attention?
Humble brag.
Isn't that funny though? Like maybe that's something maybe that would be a good step in a young man's educational life, you know, as an adolescent. You get a taste of what women have to deal with. Because, you know, we always talk about it, but we don't actually, we'll never know.
Yeah.
Like, we always like to joke about that we know what, but we actually don't at all.
No.
What if you could walk around the city and everyone else could see you with the filter on? That'd be pretty bad though, because then it's just like you'd stop knowing. What if like half the people in the office are the opposite gender, what they look like over there? All right, we're getting into dark territory here, huh?
Well, I mean, no, this is like a good, like, we could move to like this like AR world or like The Sims.
I mean, you look at this thing, they actually do a pretty good job. I mean, the algorithm works better on some people than others.
Wait, hold on.
I did it on my girlfriend. And she looks like this Guido guy from New Jersey. She really doesn't like it, but it's so funny.
That's another thing. It seems like something that like dudes would love to do,
Yeah.
but then like women would be like.
Also, like 50 people probably like heads down on this thing for a year. This algorithm. It's like, you guys want to work on curing cancer? No, I don't think that'll be as popular. Dude, I got this idea. I look like a chick when I hold up my phone and open Snapchat. It's like, cancer can wait. We'll put that down the backlog. We'll talk about that next year.
Wait, so I have questions. It was able to like get rid of your beard.
Yeah,
and everything?
it gives women stubble too. You know, it like gives them a little bit of that, and it follows your hair too. So I was like, I had come back from the gym and my hair was messed up, and it was like kind of parted back because I had worn a hat, and the hair, it made my hair, well, it already is long, but it made it even longer, and it would like follow your hairline too. So you could like look at it in real time and turn your face. And it would like follow it. It was pretty crazy. I mean,
what about for people that might not have any hair
that are more challenged? In
hair
that area?
challenged? Yes.
No, it adds it. It adds it.
Wow.
Yeah. So you could see what you would look like with luscious long locks, but also if you were a woman.
Very interesting.
It's really cool though. But yeah, like you've seen that video where they they make Obama say something he never said, and it just makes his face and voice do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
A couple years ago.
Yeah, a year or two
ago. Is that a TED thing?
I don't think so.
But it does, when you look at this thing, you're like, eventually this is going to be so high fidelity. I mean, it's like, if you look at cinematic sequences of video games from 10 or 15 years ago and then today, it's incredible. So once this thing has 10 or 15 years on it, you're just not going to be able to believe anything you see on the internet anymore at all.
Maybe we can completely automate our EmberMap videos. And not even have to record them.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Like Obama could make an EmberMap video.
Get people with like a really nice accent. I've said that to my friends before. Like I have some friends from church who have like this like silky smooth like British accent.
Yeah, I was gonna say
like,
British people.
You want a side job, man? I got a lot of scripts that I need to record. If you want to sign up, I'll pay you 50 cents per hour. He said no. But if I collected a sample of his voice without him knowing, I would have to pay him 0 cents an hour. Exploitation of.
You can just ask him like really weird questions to get like the specific words to be able to like make the script.
Yeah. How would you say the word and you like spell it out or some trick thing? That's funny.
Okay, well, this is a podcast about programming. So.
It's you know, I like I've been listening to Copy Paste Repeat a lot, and I think they call it like a bad podcast about programming, which is great because it gives them license to just talk about whatever they want to, even though they end up talking about programming stuff. It's a great podcast. They talk about burnout in the recent episode. It was really interesting. It reminded me of like our discussion about open source stuff. And, you know, motivation and like incentives and all that good stuff. So it's pretty interesting. And how I think their main point was like burnout is not as obvious or apparent as people usually talk about it. Like people usually say, oh, when you overwork yourself, you get burned out. But it's not really like that. And the symptoms aren't always the same either.
Interesting. So it's not, you don't have to work a lot of hours, but you could still burn out.
Yeah, you could be working like 6 hours a day. You could be working for yourself. And so you're not subject to the normal things you think about as being burnout, like 8-hour weeks or whatever. It's like one of the main things is like a values mismatch between you and the organization you're working at. So like, even if you're not being overworked in your mind, you're like, oh, I have a good manager. They care about me, like the value. They don't overwork me. And like, you know, but if there's a deeper values mismatch, then you try to rationalize it for a long time, but then it can lead to a form of burnout where you don't feel motivated to do the things you used to do. And, you know, it's also like kind of like depression, but kind of not. It's different. And the ways it's different from like being overworked and being depressed are why it's tricky to identify, and usually you don't find out about it until later.
Interesting. But
then there's also this thing they talk about where it takes 25% of the time it took to get burned out to recover. So that's a pretty optimistic note they end on. Because by the time you realize you're burned out, it's too late in a sense. It happened 6 months ago, but if all of it happened at once, if the values mismatch was so strong that it all happened at once, you would say, I'm never going to do that. But because it happens in small ways over time, it builds up. It's like a frog boiling.
Interesting.
In a pot, you know? It happens slowly over time. So once you realize it, you can fix a situation and get out of it quickly. But it's pretty interesting. I've definitely felt sometimes where you feel not motivated to do things that would normally make you happy because maybe you're preoccupied with work or thinking about something. And it was interesting hearing them and hearing some of the things that I resonated more strongly with me. Whereas I've never been in a situation where I've been super overworked, you know, and been like, oh, this is clearly a bad working situation. I think it's more of the kind of subtle things that they were talking about have been my challenges.
I have a question with that. Is there like a checklist of things that like values mismatch, overwork that you want to look for, or is it more you look for like a checklist of like symptoms?
I think they have both. Okay. I think they have there's some paper that they reference that has like the 6 main contributing factors. And then they also talk about the symptoms. And the symptoms are, you know, books and movies that you normally enjoy. You don't feel like doing it. You don't have energy to like play a game. You just want to like lay in your bed and watch YouTube because you literally don't have gas in the tank to do those other things. And I've definitely been there for sure, where you just want something mindless, you know?
It's dark.
Yeah. So it was very interesting. Yeah, we'll put a link to Copy Paste Repeat podcast in the show notes because I think it's a great podcast for all programmers. They talk about a wide range of programming things.
Awesome.
What you been working on?
Well, I was on vacation last week, which means nothing.
Where'd you go?
California.
Oh, that's right.
Big Sur. It was unbelievable.
Would go again? Would Big Sur again?
I would. I don't think Katie would. I think I'm more of like the outdoors.
Yeah.
Hiking. Just get lost in the mountains.
You got to sprinkle some good indoor time in there.
Yeah.
For the both of you.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely something we both wanted to do, and it was super awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. Highly recommend.
Nice. I've been working on Mirage stuff. 1.0 next Wednesday. 1.0.
Nice. We're committing to a date. So the day this podcast comes out.
Yeah, that's true. Today, Mirage 1.0 will be released.
What? So since the last release, what's new in 1.0?
Since the last 0.4 release?
Yeah.
0.415, I'm going to put, that's one, you just reminded me of one thing I need to do.
Thursday.
I need to roll up all of the changes across the 1.0 beta 1, 2, and 3 into a single place on the website. I already have most of them there. I just need to add one more thing, I think. But basically, it's basically stabilizing the existing APIs, and then we're removing Faker, so that's a breaking change, but we have a code mod for that. Most people said it worked out great. And a few more bug fixes. Right now, there's no open bugs, and I just redid the docs. I just did a once-over of the docs. I didn't rewrite everything, but just made sure it all made sense and there was some cohesion across the entire thing, because up until now, most of the docs have grown organically since like 4 years ago when the project started.
Yeah, those are really cool. I really liked you added a section for it was like integration and unit testing, and I really like that. You had some cool code examples in there.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, it's been a big gap, and that's something we want to work on with 1.0 out the door, and just get a nicer API in there for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's good there's escape hatches and nothing's blocking people now. But I think sometimes, especially when they start, people run into that all the time. So it's good to have some examples up there in the guides.
Nice.
We were just having an interesting conversation earlier here today where we're talking about Rails seeds and Mirage database state. So it's kind of interesting. People always talk about the double-edged sword where when you make a change to an Ember app powered by Mirage, as soon as you save a change and reload, the database state is reset completely, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's double-edged because you always get a clean slate, but then sometimes you just want to toggle an admin thing and save it.
Or like you have a form and it's like a 4-step form.
Right.
And then you
spend all this time creating all this data and then like
you remove a white space in a component, hit save,
yeah.
And then you're like alt tab, you're like, God.
Yes. So there's a couple of things there. Like it'd be cool. First of all, that just made me think of like hot reloading would be a good way to solve that if you're developing and you have that. Now what happens usually for us when we're in that situation is we write a test to replay that state, which is good because it's there in the test. And then the other thing is like, well, what if I'm developing and I just create this dummy data and I like want it to save? But you reload and all of it goes away. So then what you do is I need to encode this in the server like seeds area. And so you go back to like the scenario's default file and like you make a new little function, or you just tweak some of the server creates there. So you're encoding that scenario that you care about into that file. And so that when you push it up, everyone else has it. And I didn't realize it until it kind of dawned on me during our conversation earlier that like there's something really good about that because everyone's development environment is basically reproducible, identical. It's basically stateless because you don't need any state. There's no state associated. It's all in the code.
Right. What is the term? Ephemeral.
Yeah.
Is a term they use to describe servers like this. And it's true.
Yep. And whereas what often happens when you do like Rails development, since you have a stateful artifact that you're developing against, namely the database that you make changes to and it persists. And so it's very easy for you to make something that works in your machine and then doesn't elsewhere, or it's hard to tell the other person how you got into that state, right?
Yeah. Or someone asks you how you did that and you just turn to them and you're like, oh yeah, just do this, this, and this.
Right.
It always starts with just.
Right.
Just make that person an admin and it'll work.
So, you were talking about some of the best practices in Rails being in the same way that you can do it in Mirage, you can encode a good default development scenario into Cs. You can even do multiple scenarios if you wanted to organize your code that way, such that when someone pulls it down, or even someone's already been developing, if they want to just basically the equivalent of resetting, you can run rake db reset, which is going to make your database and seed it with that stuff. And best practice, I guess, is like you're always in a state where you can do that. You should never care if your development database got wiped out. It shouldn't be like, oh, I just lost this very precious configuration that was helping me develop. Like that's a sign that you have some little problem in your workflow because that's a stateful artifact that lives in your computer. It shouldn't be, your development workflow shouldn't be dependent on it.
And we've seen this we've seen this with production servers, right? Like stateless production servers are easy to deploy. They're easy to throw away. They're easy to spin up multiple instances. Like the whole 12-factor app strategy for running apps in productions, like it works really well.
Right.
Immutable production servers. So it makes sense. Like this idea should apply to our development environments.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Because it's the same thing. We're spinning up a new environment.
Exactly. Yep. In the same way, and sometimes you do need seeds for production, right? Sometimes you need to start out your app with some rows in the database, and you want to put those in the seeds file, and you want those to be idempotent, so you can run that thing over and over again. All the same things that you would do.
I just did this a few weeks ago with currencies. I'm working on an app that has to deal with multiple currencies, and we have a just idempotent
find or create by, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I just added that to Mirage actually because I needed it for a video.
Cool.
And then in the EmberMap video, it's like, if you're on a recent version of Mirage, it's like actually if you're on like the one I just published 5 minutes ago, it's like complete lie. It's like the biggest white lie ever. It's like if you're obviously find a create by, it's been here forever. It's like that's what you get to do when you're the maintainer.
Nice.
So that made us kind of just think, it's kind of an interesting thought experiment, like how it's kind of that double-edged sword in Mirage turns out to nudge you towards a good pattern building, because you're always over time making that development scenario higher and higher fidelity.
Yeah, and you're also thinking about it like, oh yeah, I need a user that's a subscriber. So what is that? Is that like a trait?
Right.
Is that, do I put that in the seed? Do I put all that data in the seed file? It's like, no, I should make this a trait. I know I'm going to use this in a test. I know I'm going to want to reuse this.
Yep.
Yeah, really, it nudges you towards like getting the seed data correct. Where with Rails, I don't do that. With Rails, I go into Rails console or database and I flip a few bits and it works and I move on.
Right. Totally. And then like also you might develop for a while and then things change enough and you're like, oh, I'll just blow away my database and start over again. But like you should be able to do that and still have a good working set of data.
Yeah. Well, one thing here is like you're saying that the whole being forced because your Mirage database resets on every page.
Because it's ephemeral. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And because you're constantly reloading the app through development,
right.
It's actually a good thing because you get better factories.
Right.
Right. Like it forces you to actually think about these things. And the same thing with production, 12-factor app servers. Every time we deploy, we get a brand new box, there's no leftover artifacts from the last deploy.
Mm-hmm.
So, by that logic, can we do like every time you run Rails S, you do DB reset?
Every time you save a file?
Yeah. That might be expensive. Maybe not. Maybe it's not. But definitely every time you run Rails S,
Right.
And that might force you
to
actually thinking about like,
I keep making this admin 3 times. All right,
yeah.
Make it in a factory, make it into a seed file or something like that.
Like what are my seed files? What are my scenarios? How am I going to set this stuff up?
No, it's true because the biggest Rails app I worked on at TED didn't have a good situation for this, and they would do the dumps every so often, and it would be bad data because of all the issues between production environment and your own environment. Image URLs wouldn't work. It would just be a very weird, awkward experience. Whereas I had this other thought when I was working on the feature for the EmberMap video series. Wouldn't it be cool if there was some way? So we talk about how we do like front-end driven development, and a lot of times we start with like new models in the front end and stuff, but sometimes the back-end schema changes for other reasons. Like we add devices or we add video views, right? Mm-hmm. And those are back there. And as soon as we want to make a UI feature that consumes those, like those things already exist. It'd be pretty cool if when the backend builds the feature, there's a really easy way to just get it in the front end in Mirage's format and like an Ember data model. So I was thinking less from the Ember data side, more from the side of I'm ready to start consuming this data and adding a feature. What does my data look like? And what does a realistic scenario look like? Instead of having to pull down production data, let's say, mm-hmm. In the same way that if you were like doing a good job as a Rails programmer, I would pull down the Rails app and I'd be able to run seeds and get representational data of video views. It would also be cool if that existed in my EmberMap Mirage thing, so that I could just say, oh, what happens like when I start building a page? Let me just start by getting all of the video views, and I have this data to work with already. That's like very representative because the backend developers writing the tests against that stuff and the logic, they have the understanding of what the data model is going to be like. Yep.
Let me speak on something I have no experience with and tell you why I'm right.
Okay.
When I was exploring this GraphQL stuff, there's this concept of persisted queries, which you can basically write a type, and you can write it in your backend, and then you can run a command that basically fans it out to your UI or your services that will want to consume that data. And they reference them by name. So you would write a thing called like get all video views, and mm-hmm. you'd write this in the back end, and then you could give it to the front end, and the front end could just run this query called get all video views, and it would have all the data in there. So that's when you were talking, that's immediately what I was thinking about, like this idea that like, okay, I've got my data model, I've got my database set up. Oh, and here I'm also going to write the query the type, because the backend is going to need to know
how to fetch those.
Maybe it's a resource.
Yep.
I'm not trying to be specific, say this only
Yep.
works with GraphQL, but
Yep.
this idea where it's like, yeah, there's something uncomfortable about sharing the models between
Right.
front end and back end, because
Right.
they have different concerns.
Right.
They run in different environments. They have access to different sets of data.
Right.
So it's not exactly that, but there's something about like your resource or your type and your Ember data model. Those are kind of similar.
The UI, UI model and the resource
Yes.
are almost the same.
So I guess my answer to this is I'd be interested to know what the
How far you can get with that.
what the GraphQL folks that do those persisted queries and name queries, how they share those. Because I think it's more, I think like the queries are like signed and hashed. So I don't think you just say like, oh, just call the video views query. I think you actually need like a build artifact.
I see.
I think, I haven't used
Like
it.
GraphQL almost.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure. I don't know what it looks like. I
Yeah.
don't use this, but that's immediately what it reminded me of.
Pretty cool. Related to that, I was talking about on Twitter, I was asking for what kind of technologies are out there that encourage sharing of models between the front end and back end. Trek had replied, like, I never have seen this work, or why is this a good idea? And after we went back and forth, we did kind of clarify, like, it would be nice to have some common language around this. Like, you have your database records, and then you have your back-end models, and then you have your resources, and then you have your UI models.
Yeah.
And the UI models and the back-end models shouldn't be shared, but the UI models and the resources, it feels like there's so much the same there that one could be derived from the other, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you guys like hash this out on Twitter?
Not really.
Okay.
I think Trek only has so much patience for me. So he just left and then went on to something else. I was like, I'm waiting. No, I'm just kidding. But it's basically like it's in the same way that Mirage can almost spec out an entire mock server just by looking at your UI models. It's a very similar thing. In the same way, like JSON API resources are almost the same as the UI models, right? But then there's like points of insertion where you want to say, oh, actually, comments count is not an attribute. It is post.comments.count.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. That's it.
Yeah. I'd definitely be interested in something that's like JSON API resources to Ember data models, especially with stuff like this comes up all the time with like filtering, or like a filter on the back end. Mm-hmm. And that'd be awesome if I could have like, I don't know what this API looks like, but if I could have that same filter on the UI code.
Right.
So I could say like, get me all my published posts. And, usually what does that look like? It's like a composable helper thing that like filters by is published, not is new, because I don't want client side stuff.
Yeah.
And so if there was just some way I could.
As if you had access to the whole back end, you're saying, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's like, I guess to like better define this, there's certain code that I would want to run on both an Ember data store and a database.
Right.
Filter by roll-ups, and also too like knowing that like I might have like an incomplete picture of data. So like on the client, I might have things that like the backend doesn't know about that aren't persisted, and also on the client, I might not have a complete set of data.
Right.
I might only have page 1 of 10, and so on. So it'd be cool to like, have terminology, I guess, that can communicate between those two things.
Super interesting. It's more than terminology. It's a API for expressing explicitly the difference in the same and what you want from the two environments. Because as we've talked about before, a lot of times you get rid of bugs by adding more expressive logic to your front end. So it's not just that you want all the tweets. It's not even that you want the first 20 tweets. You want the first 20 tweets as of some date time.
The is new thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So filter by is new.
Exactly.
Or reject by is new. Exactly. And you write that on the client because you get that new record that you didn't want to display.
That's pretty interesting. What if you could store find all tweet, store find all server tweet, store find all client tweet. So whenever you're saying, if you want this to be all messages, it would be all known messages in Slack, because as soon as you type it in the client, you want to show it. So it's going to be store.findAll tweet, right? But in Twitter, did I say tweet? This can be store.findAll message. But on Twitter, you only want to show the server tweets in the middle. When you tweet a new thing, it doesn't just append itself. It waits until it comes up in your feed. So that's actually I might have been misspeaking, but that's basically store.findAll server tweet, store.findAll both tweet, store.findAll client tweet or message or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do. I think this is where like the terminology comes in, where it's just like you want a way to express that.
And then you could add a filter on any one of those things. And if it was all, it would apply to both client known. It's the universe of all tweets includes what? The server plus the client.
Yeah.
And where they overlap, they're the same. But like, you still have conceptually two things, because they're disjoint sets, because there can be elements in this one that are not in this one, and there can be elements in this one that are not in this one, right? Mm-hmm. There's records on a server that the client doesn't know about, and then there's record on clients that the server doesn't know about.
Yep.
So they're disjoint. So what does that mean? That means there's one part of the circles that are only client, only circle, and then both. It's a Venn diagram.
Yep.
So you should be able to query all three parts of that diagram and apply the same filters to all three parts.
So this is a point I always get to, and I feel like I just slam into like a wall here, where the filter is like, okay, so we have some Boolean, and it's like is published.
Yeah.
Okay, that's easy to apply to all three of those sets, right?
Yeah.
It's like everything, the Ember data store and the Postgres database, they just have fields, Booleans, is published true or false. What about like if the filter is like derived, or it's like we call these like synthetic filters sometimes, where it's like, okay, this actually takes code. Like I have to look at.
Let's think of an example.
I have to look. It's no longer is published is true or false. I look at published date, and if published date is, today or earlier. So if the published date is in the future, this post is not published. It will be published on that date.
Yeah.
But it's not published. So now I actually have to like write code to like compute the filter, and the code in the front end and the back end is going to be different. And the front end is going to use like moment, and like moment is after. And on the back end, I'm not going to have to use an external JavaScript library because Rails is awesome, and I can just do like before now or whatever after.
So I'm working with a real programming language.
I actually just did this in Rails and in Moment, and it was super easy in both. So,
yeah.
But there's code that's running in two different environments in two different languages. So it's not just as easy as sharing like is published true. And this is where I always hit that wall. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to duplicate the logic in the front and back end.
Maybe that's fine. Maybe that is what you have to do. If you're working with a synthetic attribute, then the API would tell you, have you implemented it? Looks like you haven't. You're trying to run this on the client. You haven't implemented it. You have to implement it. You're trying to run this on the server, and you haven't implemented it. But once you do, now you have the ability to apply that filter to that middle set. Mm-hmm. And maybe the implementation detail is like they link up by IDs. Like the filters are different, but you told me the response, like the result set of this filter is this thing, so I'm going to trust that that's true. And it's like as if I'm running the same filter on both sets.
Yeah, it's not bad because I'm thinking about this as like code sharing. Like I just want to write once and share it everywhere, but that's not a problem.
Yeah,
that doesn't need something. It's more. I want the same.
It's the new record showing up in your thing or your user being edited when you don't want that. You want the users in the background to be the server users, but you want the messages in Slack to be both. So you want the middle thing for Slack. But in a form, a lot of web forms, you want this part to be the server and you want this part to be the client.
So
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, the way I tackle this today is like on the back end, I have some JSON API filter. So you have like a query param. I would just do filter like published true or whatever is published, whatever. And then on the front end, it's usually like some renderless component that like, given this list of posts, apply this filter, and sometimes there's an API for applying the filter, so you pass like a POJO into it, or you use like that Ember's hash helper, and it'd be like hash publish true, and it would give you like, an awful job explaining this. Imagine you have like a renderless component that's like filter posts, and then it's like post equals posts.
Yeah.
Filter equals, it's like hash is published true.
Yeah.
As filtered posts.
Yeah.
So those are like the two ways I do this on the front and back end. But it feels very like, it doesn't feel like formal. It feels like ad hoc. Like, sometimes I might write a
It's like
service.
you're refiltering them on the client because you might end up with more in the base set or something like that.
Yeah. There might be posts that get created on the client. There might be just as data starts to come in.
That's where I think, what if you could apply the filter explicitly to one of the three groups? Because then you would say, what is it, right? Is that enough for you to express what that is?
Absolutely.
What would it be in this case? Both or the server? Just the server?
Oh, both. Usually for this app that I've been working on, I'm just operating on the Ember data store. So it'd be both.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like the set of, no, it'd be the client. It'd be the client.
The published post or whatever?
Yeah, I have a Ember data store with a bunch of posts in it, and I want to display all the published ones.
And you don't care about the backend? Posts that are published in the backend? Right?
I do, but those get loaded in the route.
That's fine. But that's the point, though. That's where the problem is.
Yes.
That they're two different places. You want to be able to express that data in one way.
Yes.
At that level of the API.
Yes. I want to repeat this.
Yes.
This is such a problem.
Yeah.
When I'm writing the route,
Yes.
I'm thinking about how is the server going to give me all the published posts, and then when I'm writing the template,
Yes.
I'm thinking about how is this component going to get me all the published posts, and then those implementations, they kind of look like wildly different, and it's like different every time. Like sometimes I use a service, sometimes I use a component, sometimes I just can do it all in the template. So yeah.
You need to be able to express that set of posts as a single query and then decide when you want that query to execute, and you want that query to be able to run in both environments. So let's say you had resource.post.server and client where publish is true. Oh, your record doesn't have a published Boolean. You need to implement a custom filter function. So you go to your model, you say that, and you say where published at is greater than today. You do that on the backend as well. Your backend throws an error when you try to filter by and it doesn't have that. Now that you've implemented that in both places, that query is idempotent. You can just run it anywhere. It doesn't matter.
Client side post is published, server side post is published, client and server side.
Yeah. And if that is truly the expression of what that page should show, it shouldn't matter if anyone creates a post on the client or if any new post shows up on the back end and you real time stream it in. If it's changing the interface in a way you don't want, the problem is you haven't expressed it correctly in the query. Is what we were talking about. You want to imagine you're hooked up all the time to the entire server database. And if you describe completely what the set of posts should be in the UI, as if you had access to the entire server database and all client records, then you would do a filter by, whatever it would be, and you should be able to run that over and over again. It doesn't matter. Because that would avoid all this class of problems where like, oh, but once a user does this and clicks this, it saves and then undoes or whatever, now the UI is wrong, and I have to filter by as a new truth. That's not. It's like the wrong level.
Okay, so
new store for an API?
On the server side, I do this, like I said, I do this in a filter. This is like very clear that there's like a controller that gets an HTTP request, and it's has a query param with this. And
it can do all sorts of stuff. Name scope in Rails. It can do all sorts of stuff. Where permissions or where roles, whatever.
On the client, I feel like I kind of just ad hocly solve this, if you will. So like sometimes I make a component, sometimes I make a service, sometimes I do it in the route.
But it should be at the query level, The reason you
where do I write the filter? Do I open the Ember data model and write filter?
Or you go to store. Yes, I would say, let's say it's on store, and what would just an API for the rest of the episode be good?
I think on the model, right?
But the high level API, it's like store dot query server. story.query client, story.query all, or query both, right?
Yeah.
Server and client. So you want at the model level, you want to block the route on this. So you're going to do a query in the model. You're going to do store.query client and server for post, filter by is published, true. And so that's all that should happen at the route controller template level.
Yep.
You shouldn't be bringing in any provider thing to try to filter, because you should be fully describing what data is relevant in that single query, so that if either the server or client change, it can rerun at any time. It always works.
So so my next question is
where you actually implement the filter.
Yes, exactly.
So then query client and server post is filtered true says, I don't know how to do that on the client model, so you haven't shown me how to do that. Of course, it doesn't know if the server knows how to do that. It won't know until it makes the request, but it does it on the client. And then it says, you need to implement store.query post with, it's like you need to do like pattern matching. It's like you're gonna have something that's gonna be like store model, and you're gonna have a method that's like filter, resource type, and then attribute, and then maybe by default it just delegates to a method on the model that's like filter by or something like that.
Yeah, like
you know
your model has a named export.
Exactly.
Like filter.
Exactly.
Okay. You know, that's
and that way
interesting.
that's a good escape hatch, because that way if you need to like check the user's permissions to filter by like available countries, then you could just traverse your entire graph, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you had to make a network request to find, or whatever, like, I don't know, but basically, like, you need to figure out, that's pretty interesting, right? You could do it with a network, you could make it async, because maybe I need to find other data from the server to figure out if these client models belong in this set.
Yeah.
But, like, you answer that question in one place, it's pretty interesting. And then that way you get to describe the query in one query. And it can be rehydrated by any new client record or server record, and it's always up to date and accurate. It's like declarative and everything. It's pretty cool. And then you could just do that in a load records component too, like a load query or whatever.
I kind of like this. I think next time I have to do this, I will do some named export from the model or some function on the model. Can you reopen class on your Ember data model and add like a class method? So
you can.
Like capital P post.
You can. Filter is a named export is pretty cool. Let's think how you would want to test this, like, because you could get some pretty complex filters, right? So like, let's think if you want to test this, like, when I have a post that has an old publish date earlier today, it shows up in my filter by is published subset. So you just want to test it at the high level, right?
Yeah.
I think you could
Yes, I would. The implementation would be a function that takes a list of posts.
It could just be a method on the model to start with. It could be like,
those are like
instance
methods.
Yeah.
That, like operate on a single post. Can I add like a class method in Ember?
Like a static method on an ES6 class, basically?
Yeah, you can like the equivalent of reopen class.
Mm-hmm.
I think
why? Just because that's how you think about it in Ruby, basically?
Yeah, because this is a function that filters posts. Like, this is a function that filters a collection of posts.
What if it's a function that says whether the current post is in the set?
Oh, interesting.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Is published.
Sometimes you want to like pre-compute a bunch of values and then run your filter.
You could.
So like if you're running each filter inside of
a loop or
yeah, exactly. If you're running all the filter code n times inside of a loop, it gets fun. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just like,
I don't care about
it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm an Ember developer. I don't care about performance.
That's why my ember.js Tailwind build adds like 25 seconds. It uses like CSS, like SAS doesn't need to. That's pretty interesting, dude. Why don't you go make it for me? I expect it on Monday.
Well, it's funny that seriously, like
that would
the past few weeks of code, I've just been running into this, and then like things get complicated, and we kind of like move the processing logic to the back end.
Right. But then you've lost a lot.
Yeah, I end up. It's more the question of like, when I need to do this, what is it? A service? Is it a component?
Right. Right. It'd be nice to have an answer.
Yeah.
One answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you move it to the back end, there's no reason to re-implement it in the front end unless you need it. Unless you ever need server.query, store.query server and client or store.query client. Exactly. If you don't need either of those, then you don't have to re-implement it on the client.
Right, because your backend could literally send out a Boolean that's like derived runtime.
Exactly.
It's like a Boolean that's like, it's published true.
Right, and then if the client ever creates new records, it just never sets that property or whatever. You know what I mean? It never sets that, and therefore it should never be in that set or something like that.
You know, I'm saying this with a lot of confidence,
Yeah.
but then also too, like whenever there's drift between these and then I need to like reconcile them, it's always awkward.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it is better to just...
Well, let's just say you have a comments count on the post, right? You would never be able to, you could make the decision that you can never store.query client comments count is greater than 10 or something like that because, you could do that. It would just be on, basically you can do that, you just can't. It would just be an attribute. It would just be an attribute. The filter, that's only hydrated by the server.
The filter on the client side would be filtering the attribute.
Yes, exactly.
The filter on the server would be doing like a join,
exactly.
An account, and a group, whatever.
Account match,
yeah. Cool. Okay. Nice. I will report. I will try this and report back, and then in 6 months I'll let you know how much technical debt.
Is this thing still running, by the way? Why don't you? Here, I'm going to do a little monologue while you log in. All right. I've been working on my Scottish accent, and today I'm going to be talking about.
Ryan just got fired from EmberMap Inc. He's going to try to blame someone else, but don't let him.
You know, it'd be really good if you're in like a post-mortem and you're like, yeah, the server broke. We're going to go to Sam now. He's going to try to blame X, but don't let him.
Well, we had our most brilliant insight of 63 episodes about a few minutes ago, and you only heard the bad version of it. That is cool, though. I think we should give that a shot. There's more details to figure out there, but I'm tired. It's Friday afternoon. I'm ready to eat some mussels. We're going to go hit up some happy hours. Start our Summer Fridays early. Is it officially summer yet? No, Memorial Day, right?
Memorial Day, yeah.
The only other thing I want to mention was, the Tailwind 1.0 stuff, the Ember Mirage 1.0. Tailwind 1.0 did come out. It's kind of cool. We just happen to be working on the 1.0 stuff at the same time.
Wait, can you explain Tailwind 1.0?
Yeah. In a few sentences.
Yeah.
It's just finalizing APIs, making a few breaking changes, but then they did Adam and Steve did a bunch of work on the color palette and some things like that. So it's just really even more polished than it already was. It was already super polished, but yeah.
Speaking of the color palette, they're both Canadian. Did they remove the Canadian from the color palette?
They did.
Nice.
They removed it. And there's like 9 colors now instead of 6 or 7 or something like that. So it's pretty cool. It's like 2 more shades of each color. And it's 100 through 900 instead of dark, darker, darkest.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you just bump up this, just like the type scale.
Exactly.
You know, I was thinking one of the things we talk about is like beginners using the same tools as experts.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about like Rails. Like if you're starting a new Rails app, you're using the same code that's powering GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, GitHub's obviously more complex, but
right.
You're using the same tools. I was thinking about Tailwind, and I was like, man, Tailwind like really fits into this.
Really fits in.
Because I'm using the same design stuff that Steve and Adam are using. Yeah. And those guys are really good at design.
Yep. That's a really good point. I love that.
That got me really excited about Tailwind.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, if you find out a company is like not using a major piece of the framework you're using, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
You know? But the fact that they're using it and everyone else is using it is good. So I have some plans to work on Ember CLI Tailwind after this Mirage stuff is over with, because when I first wrote Ember CLI Tailwind, I didn't understand post CSS, what it was for, how its role played alongside Tailwind. And Tailwind is best used as a post CSS plugin. So I think I'm going to upgrade Ember CLI Tailwind to just set up bootstrap a post CSS plugin and workflow in your app so that you are more responsible for that code, but you also have access to the pipeline, because now you can add purge CSS, auto prefixer, all that stuff. It also takes a lot of the responsibility off of Ember CLI Tailwind and makes it not a bottleneck for upgrading Tailwind anymore, because you can just bump Tailwind CSS, and that's something that people have been wanting to do. We've already had to update Ember CLI Tailwind multiple times when Tailwind changes, and people have not been able to use 1.0. I mean, yeah, basically can't use it. So I think there's just a better way. If I built it today from scratch, I would do it differently. So I want to fix some of that stuff.
Cool. If you were doing like a Vue app, you would wire up Tailwind with Post CSS?
I think there's a Vue CLI Tailwind plugin that does it with Vue CLI, but yes.
That's what Adam would tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're in a React app, you would do the same thing.
Cool.
It's interesting. There's no way to use Tailwind in a Create React app without ejecting, which is pretty crappy. For whatever reason, you can't get Post CSS in there.
Don't most folks eject?
You know, I was just talking to someone. So one of the reasons I've been focusing on the Mirage 1.0 stuff is because we've been interested in trying to solve problems across all the frameworks and not, working on solutions that are good for everyone doing SPA development the way we're doing it. We see a lot of people doing this, and some people reinvent the wheels in some areas. And so we're kind of become more interested in how we can solve and share our solutions more generally. So one of the goals there is to make Mirage work outside of Ember. And Mirage has always been coded to work apart from Ember, and people have used it outside of Ember already. But there's just some weird idiosyncrasies about the way it's coded that depends on Ember. But, we've been working on getting it running in Express and Vue and React. And so I was pairing with someone who used to do Ember and is now in a React shop. This is also something we've seen with people that we work with and consult with and stuff, where people who watch the videos, they kind of bounce back and forth. Like they'll be at an Ember job and then they'll go to a React job for a year and then they'll come back to Ember. It'd be nice if they could use Mirage in all those situations. So I was chatting with someone and they did not eject. They built their skeleton version of a new React app that would support all the front-end developers of their company with their metrics setup and their auth setup, but it was all on top of Create React App. So I think Create React App has become much more flexible since when it first was created. So I think people can get pretty far without ejecting, which is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. But I have also seen people just very here and there lightly on Twitter saying like, don't ever eject. It's so painful. Like if you ever have to, it sucks because now you're off the path and you don't get the benefits of the upgrades that come to Create React App. So the fact that you can't add Post CSS and Tailwind to a Create React App kind of sucks.
Yeah, and okay.
I wouldn't want that to be part of like a hello world kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that requires more investigation on my part. But all that to say, kind of as we round out here, if you have done Ember in the past or are familiar with the Ember Mirage workflow and have missed it and wanting it in a different environment like a React app or a Vue app or whatever, just DM me on Twitter or message me on Discord or email me at sam@embermap.com, because I'm trying to have as many of these conversations right now as possible to learn about the pain points in those other work environments, how other communities build SPAs, get local environments set up for development and testing, and share API contracts. So those are the kind of the problems we're interested in solving next. So if that's you, definitely reach out to me.
Cool. We got to end this because something's going on with our recorder.
I was going to say let's pause it, but this is a good little forcing function. So thanks for joining us. If you want to find out show notes, you can go to embermap.com/podcast, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.